edition of Toke Signals TV. I'm Steve Elliott, editor of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through this week's biggest stories in cannabis news. First of all, let's do something fun and look at the bud pick of the week. What we have this week comes to us from Farmer Tom, who is a cannabis author, a fellow Washington State activist of mine. I met Farmer Tom this weekend at Seattle Hempfest. We talked about our books and the cannabis community. He's a great guy. He's author of the Cannabis Consumer's Guide, the definitive guide to marijuana culture. And as you can see by the bud pick of the week, he's also an accomplished farmer. I'm looking forward next week to going and visiting Farmer Tom and his garden. So that's going to be a fun road trip. Let's get on to the news. Our first story this week is a very clear illustration of the insanity and overkill of the war on marijuana. No thinking person who examines this story can seriously say this is how things should be done. Down in Texas, in Austin, which presumably is a more enlightened enclave in Texas, we have a man and a woman, ages 70 and 60, who were raided by a SWAT team and arrested for a small amount of marijuana because a suspicious neighbor called them in. Talk about overkill. Sometimes you just have to say that's prohibition and shake your head. What we have is a neighbor calling in, a concerned citizen, quote unquote, as kvue.com put it, made a call to the cops about narcotics, quote unquote, at a home on Willow Bridge Circle in West Austin. And that's according to Austin Police Department's narcotics officer, Nordstrom. The search warrant was obtained, and they didn't just send a guy over to knock on the door. They sent a militarized SWAT team to go get these dangerous potheads. Just after 6 in the morning, too. I can imagine that was quite a rude awakening for these two poor people. So there you have these cops, all Rambo'd out in their tactical outfits, feeling tough and significant, and maybe just for a few brief moments as if their sad, pointless lives meant something despite the fact that they have the singular lack of judgment to choose as their vocation, a job which involves conducting armed raids on peaceful elderly people for using a harmless plant. Guys, maybe you should consider something at McDonald's, flip some burgers. At least you'd be a little less harmless to old people that way. What we have is 4 terrified people inside the home. 2 of those people, the 70-year-old male and the 60-year-old female, were charged with marijuana possession and issued citations. And that's where this sorry story would have ended in previous years, but that was before the public's current rising disgust with the rank stupidity of the quixotic war on marijuana had reached the level of outrage. And that was before the internet allowed immediate public feedback when public employees, for example, the Austin Police Department, do really stupid things. Yep, that's where the comment section comes in. So on KVUE's news page, where they reported this story without any editorializing themselves, we have the readers weighing in, and it's almost all negative. We have people calling for the firing and or resignation of Austin Police Chief Art Acevedo. There's actually a petition, which I linked in the story, to change.org, a petition to fire the police chief. We have citizens who are outraged. The Austin Police Department is wasting their tax money raiding elderly people with a SWAT team for a small amount of marijuana. A judge issued a warrant, mind you, with a probable cause being the mere assumptions of a nosy, snooping, bored housewife, commented Ted Dannerth, who's vice president of sales and marketing at the Austin-based company Barbo. If this isn't a sign of the times, Dannerth said, then I don't know what is. Please share this on your wall so people can see that the government is kicking down doors now on a whim. So when people are smoking a joint, obviously that's still against the law in Texas. You have to ask yourself, if you're going to have a law enforcement response to an anonymous call, what constitutes an appropriate level for that response? Do you really need a paramilitary SWAT team with armor and armored vehicles, heavily armed, coming in on these old people to tell them to stop smoking a joint? Please, get real. Let's stop this foolishness. Moving on to the second story of the week. As many of you know, this past weekend was the weekend of the biggest pot festival of the year anywhere on earth, and that would be Seattle Hempfest 2013. I was there. I had a great time. I saw a bunch of friends that I normally don't see any other time of the year, and it was wonderful. However, during that 3 days, I got a disquieting feeling that our beloved Hempfest, which has always been a free speech event and pretty much an independent event, an event which has been a protestable, could be co-opted by big corporate money. What on earth am I talking about? Some mainstream media reports would have us believe that Hempfest is now more of a celebration than a protest. For those who are easily satisfied with surface appearances, that may well be the case. But for those who have been watching and paying attention, Hempfest has always been a celebration all along, a celebration of cannabis culture and the freedom we deserve, but don't yet fully have. And as for celebrations, why, you could easily get the idea from some of the shallower thinkers among those speaking at Hempfest that the battle is won, it's over. Most of those capable of deeper thought brought up the point that the approval of Washington state legalization measure I-502 is only the first step down a very long road. We won't reach the end of this freedom road until marijuana is really legal, until you can grow it at home, until cannabis has roughly the same level of regulation as tomatoes or cabbage. Before we get on with it, here's one bit of rich irony about I-502. On Sunday, I was at Sealy Stage, and for years there at Sealy Stage at 4:20 in the afternoon, joints, hundreds of joints have traditionally been thrown out to an enthusiastic crowd. Now, as 4:20 approached on Sunday, the MC announced from the stage that no joints could be distributed from the stage due to the passage of 502. Ah, the joys of legalization, eh? Anyway, the current severe overregulation of cannabis is where the protestable part of Hempfest comes in. This festival has always defined itself as a free speech event, a place where injustices can be decried, where the government and the corporations can be held to a higher standard. That is the soul of Seattle Hempfest, to provide a venue where cannabis truths may be told, a level playing field where we can meet together and plan our path forward as a culture. I love Seattle Hempfest. Back in 2004, I first achieved my long-held dream of actually attending the event. I've been to every one since except 2009, when abdominal surgery made that impossible. And I'll always remember the wistful feeling of looking across Puget Sound, seeing the Seattle waterfront, seeing Myrtle Edwards Park, seeing the haze rising over the park from my room where I was convalescing. That's the only year I've missed since I started going, and I enjoy this event every year. But after spending Friday, the first day of Hempfest this year, in the park on the beautiful Puget Sound waterfront, it really is a wonderful place for a pot rally. I couldn't get rid of some disquieting feelings. The hundreds of merchandise booths lining the park and dominating the attendees' attention at times gave this event the vibe more of a trade show than of a festival. At times it seemed that the emphasis was perhaps a little skewed towards commerce. Even some of the vendors were complaining to me about the sharply increased number of booths this year, even as compared to last. One vendor told me about high booth prices and asked me, how do they expect us to break even on the booth fee when they divide the pie into much smaller slices by selling hundreds more booth spaces every year? This particular vendor told me that she and her husband had paid a premium booth rate for a corner booth for more visibility, more traffic. But then they found that the space next to them, which was to have remained empty, had been promised to another vendor, and only vigorous protest by the husband kept that from happening. Now, of course, mom and pop vendors like this have always been the lifeblood of Hempfest. These vendors deserve to get what they pay for when it comes to placement and exposure. That's not the most worrisome problem, though, when it comes to Hempfest commercialization. The most worrisome problem, by far, is the possibility of corporate co-option by big marijuana money, now that the implementation of I-502's retail marijuana stores is coming right down the pike. While I was there, I noticed banners advertising a Seattle-based company called Diego Pellicer. These people are would-be purveyors of premium marijuana, as they put it. They had their banners on a couple of the major stages. The recently departed CEO of Diego Pellicer, Jamin Shively, told the press a couple months ago that he planned to bring connoisseur-grade cannabis to the Washington state market, and that his company plans to charge up to $50 a gram for it. Now, currently in Washington state, the going rate, at least at medical marijuana dispensaries, hovers at around $10 a gram. That's just for comparison purposes. Mr. Shively and Diego Pellicer, they're talking about $50 a gram. Now, that's fine as far as it goes. If Diego Pellicer can find sucker stoners willing to pay $50 a gram, more power to everyone involved. If they're all happy, I'm happy. But also a part of this company, Diego Pellicer, and still with the company, in a strategic alliance, quote unquote, a company which says it aims to control up to 50% of the legal marijuana market, is Seattle Hempfest Vice President John Davis. Yes, John Davis, the second in command at Hempfest, below only Executive Director Vivian McPeak, is very invested in the success of I-502's soon-to-come retail marijuana outlets, because he's involved up to the ears in a company that's going to lose its ass if this doesn't happen. Now let's think a minute about possible conflicts of interest between a festival which has as its reason for being bringing all the educational voices in the marijuana community together, and on the other hand, a corporation which has as its reason for existence gleaning as much profit as possible for stockholders by selling cannabis for as much as the market will bear. Now, it seems pretty obvious that if Diego Pellicer is a major financial contributor to Seattle Hempfest, that it might, shall we say, influence the selection of speakers and panelists for the stages and symposium panels that are the true educational lifeblood of this festival every year. It seems equally obvious to me that those who happen to be gadflies or outliers on the scene might be quickly and permanently frozen out of Hempfest merely for pointing out in this rapidly ripening apple we call legalization in Washington state that there are some worms in this apple. Those who haven't been particularly friendly to Diego Pellicer, or those who are perceived as being quote unquote bad for profits, no matter how much they love Hempfest, they might not be welcome anymore. I wasn't even sure I'd be writing this commentary, by the way, until on Saturday night at closing time, 8 o'clock. The crowd is exiting the gate and being encouraged to exit since it's time to go home, shut the park down for the night. A Hempfest staff member, in his official t-shirt, yelled out, told the departing crowd, "Thank you for coming. It's time to go home. Bring more money tomorrow." That kind of put this thing into stark relief for me. This monetization, commercialization, and what's worse, corporatization of Hempfest. Now, it's not too hard to get frozen out of the Hempfest speaker schedule. Just ask Steve Surich. He's a cannabis activist with the Cannabis Action Coalition in Seattle. And despite being one of the most prominent and uncompromising voices on the medical cannabis scene in Washington state, Surich hasn't been invited to speak at Hempfest for years. And that's really unfortunate, not just for Steve Surich. It's unfortunate because Hempfest attendees never get to hear his point of view. They never get even the opportunity to consider what Steve Surich has to say. They never get a chance to process, analyze, and digest his information and to make it part of their own perspective on this rapidly changing world of cannabis legalization. More information is a good thing. Having divergent perspectives and incorporating those into your own is a good thing. But the reason Seattle Hempfest attendees don't get to incorporate Steve Surich's perspectives into their own is apparently because Surich's brash manner and outspoken nature have ruffled a few feathers along the way. Hell, if brash manners and outspokenness is all it takes to get banned from Seattle Hempfest, then John Davis himself wouldn't be allowed to speak there after some of the statements he made to anti-502 activists last fall. But that's not the answer. Banning people from the discussion doesn't serve anyone, except those who want to dominate the conversation at the expense of the facts. Now, I love and enjoy speaking at Hempfest. If you saw me there, you know that. I love bringing the message of the cannabis plant and its productive, mutually beneficial 12,000-year relationship with the human species to people who want to know more about it. In fact, I believe that's why I'm here on this planet. There's nothing I'd rather do than talk about marijuana, to share what I know about this wonderful plant with as many people as possible. So why on earth am I possibly endangering my ability to do that at Seattle Hempfest next year, after having a well of a time speaking there in 2011, 2012, and again this year, by pointing out the possible influence of big corporate money on this festival? Because the battle for the soul of something that has been as beautiful, as important as Seattle Hempfest shouldn't occur in the dark. It shouldn't occur behind closed doors of corporate boardrooms, and it shouldn't occur in secret core staff meetings. The deals which decide who exactly will sponsor this event and who exactly will get to speak at next year's rally shouldn't be influenced by what might be good for business or bad for business from the point of view of a company selling $50 grams to over-moneyed hipsters. No. Hempfest has been far too special to let it go out like that. The sweat equity, the back-breaking labor, and the total dedication of thousands of Hempfest volunteers is worth more than that. I'd like to think that the unpaid volunteers to whom Hempfest owes its ability to function, its ability to come back and do another miracle every year, and it is no less than a miracle to pull this thing together. I would think that that would influence festival policy as much as corporate bigwigs or in-groups. Now, as I said, Hempfest volunteers are completely unpaid. They do what they do for the cause. They believe in this. They believe that we should make marijuana legal for everyone and accessible to everyone who wants or needs it. They don't do all that back-breaking labor just so that John Davis's company can charge $50 a gram for overpriced yuppie buds. Damn few of these unpaid volunteers will ever be able to afford $50 a gram weed. I know I won't. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a free market economy. There's nothing wrong with making an honest profit on a good product. But damn it, there are great perils in becoming dependent on big corporations for your existence, Hempfest. Please beware. That kind of corporate money does not come without ceding some control. What's it going to be, Hempfest? Is the money going to talk more loudly than your volunteers? Will a once proud and vital movement be co-opted by the glittering prizes and endless compromises of cannabis capitalism? Will free speech at Hempfest be one of the first casualties of legal marijuana in Washington? Stay tuned. On to our third story. Down under in New Zealand, we have a cannabis advocate running for mayor. And this fine gentleman is 63-year-old Dr. Green. Dr. Green has already been jailed 2 times in New Zealand for the possession of marijuana, and he's now entered the race for the mayor of, and these New Zealand names are difficult. Please, Kiwis, forgive me if I am slaughtering them, as I very likely am. He is entering the race for mayor of the Ruapehu district, and I apologize for my pronunciation. Anyway, he's back in his hometown after a 40-year absence, and he said he wants to make a mark. And if anybody knows how to make a mark, it's Dr. Green. He has bought the former Freezing Works Administration Center, and he wants to turn that into a museum. And if I know Mr. Green very well, it's going to be a hemp-based museum. He's also the founder of New Zealand's most visible cannabis club, the Dactory. And his motto is live like it's legal. That's exactly what Dr. Green does. The cannabis laws are so wrong, Green said. They are fueled by a pernicious prejudice and perpetuate harmful stereotypes that adversely affect users and their families. Now, according to Dr. Green, cannabis is more natural, it's a healthier option than other drugs, and it doesn't fuel crime. You smoke a joint right now, you're not going to all of a sudden going to be overcome with the urge to go out and rob a bank or belt somebody over the head, Green said. There's nothing within cannabis that turns you into a criminal. Green said he had chatted with local police who said they'd leave him alone if he didn't break the law. Green said, we don't intend to break the law. The reality is cannabis is being legalized around the world, and it's only a question of when it will be here. You cannot overdose on cannabis, Green said. There are many people who have died from drinking too much alcohol. One night of heavy drinking, and you can die. Tobacco will almost certainly kill you. Cannabis has never killed anyone. You cannot keep locking us up when the science says cannabis is safer than alcohol or tobacco to the individual and to the community, Green said. Dr. Green wasn't always pro-cannabis. He didn't even try marijuana until he was 39 years old. He says he was a prohibitionist when he grew up. He didn't know why. He just told that's how you think about this subject. So many people receive knowledge about how they're supposed to think rather than thinking for themselves. He broke out of that trap, though. He thought cannabis was evil and was very much opposed to it. He always thought, okay, it's against the law. That means it's bad. It causes brain damage. But then he finally tried it when he's 39 years old. And he said, I found out then why young people find it so attractive. Doctor woke up the following morning and he didn't have a hangover. And he said, I was no longer a prohibitionist. From that point on, I became immersed in cannabis culture. Dr. Green is going to make a good mayor for Arapahoe District, and I wish I could vote for the guy. In D.C., we have our next story. The District of Columbia, of course, now has legalized medical marijuana dispensaries and a program right there in view of the nation's federal government capital. We have people buying marijuana legally under D.C. law. Now in D.C., they're leading the way with a proposed program to subsidize medical marijuana for low-income patients. This proposed program would be the first of its kind in the nation, and it would require dispensaries in D.C. to set aside 2% of their profits to subsidize these low-income patients. Dispensaries would give at least a 20% discount on marijuana to people at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, according to the Washington Times. Now, while dispensaries sometimes individually as an initiative offer reduced prices to poor patients, no state has put this type of provision into their medical marijuana regulations, according to Alan St. Pierre of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. St. Pierre says this rule is totally unprecedented in the medical marijuana community. Medical marijuana sales in D.C. began just last month at Capital City Care Dispensary. Prices for the marijuana there seem quite expensive, at least by Pacific Northwest standards, with ounces of cannabis ranging from $380 to $440. Now, since poor people potentially comprise a large portion of medical marijuana patients, after all, you must be seriously ill to qualify. The sliding scale program is intended to improve access for them. Often, medical marijuana patients can't hold full-time jobs because of the very illnesses that qualify them to use cannabis. Medical marijuana cards issued in D.C. in the future will indicate whether they are low income and thus eligible for these discounts, according to the Times. Arizona has a sliding scale program for medical marijuana patient registration. When you go to see a doctor to qualify for your card, that's the state, which normally charges $150 for that procedure, reduces it to $75 if you're low income. But that discount is funded by state government, not the dispensaries, unlike the D.C. proposal. Supporters praised the D.C. proposal for alleviating what they call prohibition-level prices on medical marijuana. And that's according to Dan Riffle at the Marijuana Policy Project, which is based in D.C. Marijuana is overpriced because it's overregulated. So a program for the poor is necessary, Riffle said. There's this outdated hysteria surrounding marijuana, but it's much safer than many other medications. What's not clear, according to the Times, is when the rule, which was published in the D.C. Register last week and is in the midst of a 30-day review period, will actually take effect. Dispensaries will be required to reserve funds to ensure that low-income discounts they give amount to 2% of their income under the rule. The city will audit reports from the dispensaries yearly and can adjust the percentage of profits that the dispensaries will be required to reserve for subsidies. The shops themselves say they are unsure how they will meet the new requirements. A mandate that dispensaries cover discounts up to 2% of their income could be fulfilled in several different ways, and officials haven't precisely described how it will operate. Also not yet specified are which types of marijuana the dispensaries would be required to discount. DC dispensaries carry multiple strains, and as I mentioned, some are more expensive than others. While dispensary owners claim they sympathize with low-income patients, a 20% discount is not insignificant, said the president of the Metropolitan Wellness Dispensary in D.C. He added that discounts are beneficial, but he said he was concerned about the ratio of low-income patients to those who are not. Nobody yet understands how the system is going to work, according to Alan St. Pierre of Normal. And so far, officials at the D.C. Department of Health aren't returning calls seeking comment. We're going to be watching that with a lot of interest. It is very much true that many medical marijuana patients cannot buy all the medicine they need due to their limited income and due to their precarious health limiting their employment. Staying within the federal government for the next story, we had this week a federal agency taking a lot of heat for refusing to admit the obvious. They wouldn't admit that marijuana is safer than alcohol. One of them can kill you, the other one doesn't. That seems pretty simple to most of us. Apparently, those within the National Institute on Drug Abuse don't find it quite that simple. The NIDA released a statement this week refuting a claim in a recent ad by the Marijuana Policy Project that described cannabis as being less toxic than alcohol. NIDA is part of the National Institute of Health, which is a federal agency, of course. Claiming that marijuana is less toxic than alcohol cannot be substantiated since each possess their own unique set of risks and consequences for a given individual, the NIDA lied. Not surprisingly, the MPP quickly fired back, rightly calling the NIDA statement preposterous. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control report no marijuana use-only deaths each year, and there has never been a marijuana overdose death in history. Not even one, according to Mason DeVert, Director of Communications for the MPP. The CDC reports tens of thousands of people die each year from alcohol alone, and hundreds die from acute overdose. There's a big difference between those two substances: the body count. Citing statistics from the CDC, PolitiFact noted that there were 41,682 deaths attributed to alcohol in 2010, while cannabis, of course, had zero. Dr. Richard Gable, who conducted an 8-year study of recreational drug use, said his results side with MPP's claims. No drug is good for teenagers, Dr. Gable said, but when it comes to the chances of immediate death by chemical toxicity, marijuana is about 100 times less toxic than alcohol or cocaine. What's funny, according to Mason DeVert of the MPP, is that PolitiFact, the online fact-checking site, felt the need to fisk his claim that marijuana is less toxic than alcohol, but not the need to fisk the one made by the federal agency. Hopefully, the truth eventually wins in a free marketplace of ideas. We had a positive study this week, very encouraging on the science front, that cannabis is the least risky drug for driving. This new study is from Denmark. It confirms, of course, what marijuana advocates have known for years. Cannabis is much safer than other substances when it comes to driving impairment, particularly if you are an experienced user. When it comes to driving under the influence, alcohol is still the most deadly drug we know. These results were published online in the scientific journal Accident Analysis and Prevention. And they clearly show that with a blood alcohol level of 1.2 grams per liter, 0.12% blood alcohol content or higher, you are 30 times more likely to get in a serious accident than drivers with any amount of marijuana in your system. These results, of course, call into question the wisdom and justice, indeed the sanity, of per se marijuana DUI laws, such as those instituted in Washington state by legalization measure I-502. Until this per se limit of 5 nanograms per milliliter was made into law by I-502, police had to prove actual impairment in contested marijuana DUI court cases. They don't have to do that anymore. If you're over 5 nanograms per milliliter, per se, that means you were guilty. The Danish study, after examining data from almost 2,500 serious car accidents in 6 European countries, found that marijuana poses little threat of driving impairment. While strict and sometimes zero tolerance cannabis driving laws have been adopted in many places around the world, science continues to show that these laws exaggerate the risk of driving stoned. There is even, in fact, evidence which suggests that marijuana makes you a better driver, particularly if you are experienced at using it. A driving simulator study from 2000 from the UK Department of Transport found that unlike drunk drivers, drivers under the influence of cannabis seem aware that they are impaired and compensate for this in a number of ways, including driving more slowly. Another study, published in 2011 by scientists at the nonprofit research group IZA, found that states where they've legalized medical marijuana have experienced a drop in auto accident-related deaths. Using data from the Fatality Analysis Reporting System, FARS, for the period 1990 to 2009, they found that traffic fatalities fall by nearly 9% after the legalization of medical marijuana. We have another encouraging scientific study as well this week. This one finds that heavy marijuana use is linked to better memory and brain function in schizophrenia. Marijuana helps patients with schizophrenia, according to this new research from Canada. The study was published in the scholarly journal Psychiatry Research, and it found that heavy cannabis users perform better on memory tasks than those who avoid marijuana. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI scans, also revealed better brain function in an area responsible for complex thinking and decision making. These researchers at the University of Montreal studied 145 patients with a dual diagnosis, cannabis dependence, quote unquote, and schizophrenia, and 14 patients with schizophrenia only who didn't use marijuana. Our results suggest that emotional memory and prefrontal lobe functioning are preserved in dual diagnosis patients, the researchers wrote. Now, what they are describing is that they saw no difference between the emotional responses of the two groups during resting states, although patients were evaluated based on emotional memory, and they suggest that the better performance of marijuana users could reflect a more general difference in memory. An earlier MRI study found less impaired brain functioning in schizophrenic cannabis users as compared to schizophrenic non-users, the authors of the new study noted. Likewise, another study published just this month suggested that some symptoms of schizophrenia could be due to a lack of cannabinoids on the brain, that schizophrenia itself may be closely related to cannabinoid deficiency. Almost half of schizophrenic patients also suffer from some substance use disorder. They are in effect self-medicating for their symptoms. They are trying to alleviate their psychological distress. Tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis are the most frequently used substances by schizophrenics. Some scientists, even in the face of statistics that have shown no corresponding rise of schizophrenia with the rise of cannabis use, which of course would make sense if cannabis use is associated with the development of schizophrenia, they still continue to insist that marijuana causes problems when it comes to schizophrenia. But the latest study only adds to the growing literature showing that some key functions, negative symptoms, social skills, and cognition are preserved more in patients who use cannabis heavily under schizophrenia than those who don't. Really promising research, and it may point the way to future treatments for schizophrenia. Before I leave you this week, let me point you towards a story that you don't want to miss on Toke Signals. It is by Mr. Ron Marksick, who is, of course, Mr. Worth Repeating. And Ron, as many of you know, he has many fans and is getting more every day, is a former NYPD cop. He's a former high school health teacher, and he's a former registered nurse. So he brings a breadth of experience and perspective to his investigations of the medical aspects of cannabis that you could hardly find anywhere else. This week, what Ron tells us about is that contrary to what you hear from many government propagandists and prohibitionists, marijuana is one of the best studied medicines in history. They will try to tell you that, quote unquote, more research is needed. That seems to be their mantra. What that translates to is that we can't let anyone use it yet. We can't let it help anyone yet. We got to do more tests. Well, the facts are that an overwhelming amount of very promising research has been gathered supporting the use of medical cannabis for many illnesses and diseases, and the evidence has gotten impossible to ignore. Contrary to government misinformation, Mr. Marksick tells us, cannabis is one of the best studied medicines in history. You definitely want to check this article out for yourself. Ron just ticks them off for you. He goes down a list of 7 different major medical conditions that can be effectively addressed by cannabinoid supplementation. And he throws in an extra credit one, type 2 diabetes, for which cannabis is showing enormous promises of treatment. So you might want to check into room 420 and take that class with Mr. Ron Marksick. Check out the story on Toke signals. Worth repeating, marijuana is one of the best studied medicines in history. I think we've come to the end of the show where it's time to relax and enjoy the fruits of our labor. Until next week, stay lifted.